There's one near you, right now. Within 50 miles of where you live, there's a facility storing enough hazardous chemicals to kill thousands of people if something goes wrong. You've probably driven past it. Maybe you've seen the tanks, the pipelines, the smokestacks. Maybe you didn't think twice, but the people who run these facilities think about it constantly. Because they know what you don't. That safety margins are thin, that inspections are infrequent, that equipment ages and fails, and that when disasters happen at industrial sites, they happen fast. An explosion, a toxic cloud, a fire that can't be stopped. And by the time emergency services arrive, it's already too late. This isn't speculation. This isn't fear-mongering. In the past 20 years, over a dozen major industrial accidents in the United States alone have killed hundreds and injured thousands. Texas City, West Texas, Philadelphia, sites that were supposed to be safe, that passed inspections, that had emergency plans, and they exploded anyway. So let's talk about 5 types of industrial facilities that exist in nearly every state. Let's talk about what they store, what can go wrong, and why the systems designed to keep you safe are failing. Because the next disaster isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. The first threat, chemical plants. There are over 10,000 chemical manufacturing facilities across the United States. They produce everything from fertilizers to plastics to pharmaceuticals. And they store massive quantities of hazardous materials. Chlorine, ammonia, hydrogen fluoride, phosgene, substances that are toxic in parts per million, that can kill with a single breath, that form clouds heavier than air and roll across the ground into neighborhoods. The danger isn't just explosion, it's release, a leak, a valve failure, a tank rupture. And once those chemicals are airborne, wind carries them for miles. In 2005, a freight train derailed in Graniteville, South Carolina. A tanker car carrying chlorine gas ruptured. The gas spread through the town. 9 people died. Over 250 were hospitalized. Thousands were evacuated. The chlorine burned lungs, eyes, skin. Survivors still deal with respiratory problems nearly 20 years later. That was one rail car. Imagine a plant storing hundreds of tons. Now think about where these plants are located. Many were built decades ago when the land around them was empty. But cities expanded. Suburbs sprawled. Today, chemical plants that were once isolated are surrounded by homes, schools, and shopping centers. In Houston, Texas, over 40 chemical plants operate within the city limits. Millions of people live within the potential impact zone. After Hurricane Harvey in 2017, the Arkema plant in Crosby flooded. Refrigeration systems failed. Organic peroxide stored on site began to heat. The chemicals ignited. Multiple explosions followed. Toxic smoke billowed across the area. Emergency responders were hospitalized. Residents within a mile and a half were evacuated. The plant had a safety plan. It had backup systems. But the hurricane overwhelmed everything. And that's the problem. These facilities plan for normal conditions, not worst-case scenarios. Not hurricanes. Not earthquakes. Not cyber attacks that could disable safety systems remotely. The risks are growing, but the regulations haven't kept pace. Chemical Safety Board investigations have repeatedly found the same failures. Inadequate safety systems, deferred maintenance, undertrained staff, poor communication with local communities. After the West Texas fertilizer explosion in 2013, which killed 15 people, injured over 160, and destroyed an entire neighborhood, investigators discovered the facility hadn't been inspected in years. It stored ammonium nitrate in wooden bins. No sprinklers. No fire suppression. The explosion registered 2.1 on the Richter scale and left a crater 90 feet wide. Homes were obliterated. A school was damaged. An apartment complex was destroyed, and the residents had no idea what was stored there. The plant wasn't required to inform them. No evacuation plan existed. When the fire started, firefighters walked into a death trap. They had no information about the chemicals inside. No warning that the building was a bomb. 4 of the 15 dead were volunteer firefighters. They died because the system failed to protect them. The The second threat, oil refineries. The United States has over 130 refineries processing millions of barrels of crude oil every day. Refineries are inherently dangerous. They operate under extreme pressure and temperature. They handle flammable hydrocarbons. Benzene, hydrogen sulfide, sulfuric acid, equipment corrodes, pipes crack, valves stick. And when something fails, the results are catastrophic. In 2005, the BP refinery in Texas City exploded. A distillation tower overfilled and vented flammable vapor. The vapor ignited. The explosion killed 15 workers and injured over 170. The blast was heard miles away. Debris rained across the facility. Investigators found that BP had cut maintenance budgets, ignored safety warnings, and prioritized production over safety. Workers had raised concerns for years. Management dismissed them. The explosion was preventable and BP was fined. But the fine $21 million was a fraction of the company's quarterly profit. The message, cutting corners pays even if people die. Refineries are clustered in specific regions. The Gulf Coast, California. The Midwest. In cities like Houston, Baton Rouge, and Los Angeles, refineries sit next to residential neighborhoods. When accidents happen, entire communities are at risk. In 2012, a fire at the Chevron refinery in Richmond, California, sent a toxic plume of smoke over the city. 15,000 people sought medical treatment for respiratory problems. The cause? A corroded pipe that had been flagged for replacement but wasn't fixed due to cost. The pipe leaked. The leak ignited. The fire burned for hours. Chevron was fined, but once again the penalty was pocket change compared to revenue. And the residents? They were told the air was safe, that the smoke, while unpleasant, posed no long-term risk. But studies later showed elevated rates of asthma and other respiratory conditions in the affected area. The refinery is still operating. The risks remain, and the people living nearby have no choice but to hope it doesn't happen again. The third threat, fertilizer storage facilities. Ammonium nitrate is one of the most common fertilizers in the world. It's also a powerful explosive. The Oklahoma City bombing used ammonium nitrate. So did the Beirut explosion in 2020, which killed over 200 people and destroyed half the city. In the United States, thousands of facilities store ammonium nitrate. Feed stores, agricultural suppliers, distribution centers. Most are in rural areas, but not all, and the regulations governing storage are weak. The West Texas disaster exposed the gaps. The facility was storing over 40 tons of ammonium nitrate. It was located 750 feet from a middle school, 1,200 feet from a nursing home. There was no buffer zone, no notification requirement. The state knew the plant existed, but local emergency responders didn't know what chemicals were inside. When the fire started, they had no idea they were standing next to a bomb. The explosion destroyed over 150 buildings. The damage extended for miles, and it could happen again, anywhere. After West, new regulations were proposed, requirements for storage conditions, inspections, notification to local fire departments. But the rules were voluntary, not mandatory, and even where regulations exist, enforcement is inconsistent. Budget cuts have reduced the number of inspectors. Facilities can go years without inspection, and many sites are exempt from reporting requirements if they store below certain thresholds. But those thresholds are high. A facility can store several tons of ammonium nitrate without triggering reporting. Several tons is enough to level a city block. The risk is compounded by climate change. Extreme weather, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes can damage storage facilities and trigger disasters. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey caused flooding at multiple chemical and fertilizer sites across Texas. Some released toxic chemicals into floodwaters. Others came dangerously close to catastrophic failure. We got lucky. Next time we might not. The fourth threat, natural gas pipelines and storage facilities. The United States has over 300,000 miles of natural gas transmission pipelines. They run under neighborhoods, schools, hospitals. Most are buried and invisible. Most of the time, they're safe. But when they fail, the results are devastating. In 2010, a natural gas pipeline exploded in San Bruno, California. A 30-foot-long section of pipe ruptured, releasing natural gas that ignited instantly. The fireball shot 1,000 feet into the air. The explosion killed 8 people and destroyed 38 homes. The blast was so powerful it left a crater in the street. Investigators found that the pipeline was over 50 years old, poorly maintained, and had welds that didn't meet safety standards. Pacific Gas and Electric, the operator, had failed to properly inspect and maintain the line. The company was fined and convicted of criminal charges, but the people who died stayed dead, and thousands of miles of aging pipelines remain in service across the country. Natural gas storage facilities are another risk. Liquefied natural gas, LNG, is stored at extremely low temperatures in massive tanks. An LNG tank failure could release a vapor cloud that, if ignited, would create a fireball visible for miles. In 2004, an LNG facility in Algeria exploded, killing 27 workers. The blast was triggered by a boiler failure that caused a chain reaction. The facility was considered state-of-the-art. It had safety systems. It had trained personnel. And it exploded anyway. In the United States, LNG import and export terminals are concentrated along the coasts, near Boston, near New York, near major population centers. A terrorist attack, an accident, or a natural disaster affecting one of these facilities could kill thousands. Security is tight, but vulnerabilities remain. As demand for natural gas grows, more facilities are being built, more risk is being added, more people are being placed in the potential blast zone. The fifth threat: warehouses storing hazardous materials. These are the facilities you'd never suspect. Distribution centers, logistics hubs, storage warehouses that handle everything from cleaning chemicals to industrial solvents to lithium-ion batteries. Many are in industrial parks, but others are in mixed-use areas near homes and businesses. And the regulations governing them are minimal. In 2021, a warehouse fire in Passaic, New Jersey, burned for days. The facility stored chemicals, plastics, and other materials. The smoke was toxic. Schools were closed. Residents were told to stay indoors. Air quality monitors detected hazardous levels of particulates and volatile organic compounds. And that was just a fire. If the chemicals inside had reacted violently, the explosion could have leveled the surrounding area. The owners were cited for safety violations, but the warehouse had passed inspections. The rise of e-commerce has created a boom in warehouse construction. Massive facilities storing everything from household goods to industrial supplies. Many handle lithium-ion batteries, which are used in electronics, power tools, and electric vehicles. These batteries are highly flammable and difficult to extinguish once ignited. Warehouse fires involving lithium batteries have increased dramatically in recent years. In 2022, a fire at a battery recycling facility in Fredericton, Missouri, burned for weeks. The smoke contained toxic metals and acids. Thousands of residents were evacuated. The facility had been cited for violations before the fire, but it remained operational. The pattern is clear. Regulations are weak, enforcement is inconsistent, and disasters happen when oversight fails. So why aren't these risks addressed? Because regulation costs money. Because industry lobbies against stricter rules. Because politicians prioritize economic growth over safety. After every disaster, there's outrage, investigations, promises of reform, and then the news cycle moves on. The regulations are watered down, funding for inspections is cut, and the same conditions that caused the last disaster remain in place for the next. The Chemical Safety Board, the federal agency responsible for investigating industrial accidents, is chronically underfunded. It has fewer than 50 employees. It can only investigate a fraction of incidents. State agencies are even more stretched. Inspectors are overworked. Sites go years without inspection, and companies know they can cut corners because the chance of getting caught is low. Even when they are caught, fines are minimal. A few $1 million, less than a day's revenue, the cost of doing business. And there's another problem: secrecy. After 9/11, the federal government restricted public access to information about hazardous chemical storage. The logic was to prevent terrorists from targeting facilities, but it also prevents communities from knowing what's nearby. Citizens can't find out what chemicals are stored at the plant down the road. Emergency responders often don't know until there's an incident. The information exists, but it's classified or difficult to access. Companies argue that disclosure would create panic or competitive disadvantage, but the real reason is liability. If people knew what was stored near their homes, they'd demand action. They'd demand buffer zones, relocations, better safety standards, and that costs money. The risk is real. It's not hypothetical. Every industrial facility is one equipment failure, one human error, one natural disaster away from catastrophe, and the trends are worsening. Infrastructure is aging. Climate change is increasing the frequency of extreme weather. Deregulation is weakening safety standards, and the push for cheaper, faster production creates pressure to cut corners. The people living near these facilities are not being protected. They're being subjected to risks they didn't consent to and often don't even know about. And when disaster strikes, the response is always the same: thoughts and prayers, investigations, fines that don't matter, and promises of reform that never come. What can you do? First, find out what's near you. Some states have public databases listing hazardous material storage sites. Environmental groups sometimes maintain maps. If you live near an industrial facility, research what it does and what it stores. Second, demand transparency. Contact local officials. Demand that companies disclose what chemicals they store and what emergency plans exist. Third, support stronger regulations. Vote for politicians who prioritize safety over industry profits. Support organizations pushing for better oversight. Fourth, have a personal emergency plan. Know evacuation routes. Have supplies ready. Understand the risks in your area, because the government and the companies won't protect you. You have to protect yourself. The next industrial disaster is coming. It might be a chemical plant, a refinery, a fertilizer depot, a pipeline, a warehouse. It might be in Texas or California or New Jersey or your state. It will kill people. It will injure hundreds. It will devastate a community. And afterward, there will be investigations and reports and promises. And nothing will fundamentally change. Because the system is designed to protect profits, not people. Because the cost of prevention is borne by companies, but the cost of disaster is borne by communities. Because those making the decisions don't live near the facilities, don't breathe the air downwind, don't send their children to the schools in the blast radius. They're safe. You're not. And until that changes, the explosions will keep happening, the chemicals will keep leaking, and people will keep dying. That's the truth they don't want you to understand. That's the reality hiding behind every industrial fence and storage tank. And that's why you need to pay attention. Because the next disaster could be tomorrow. And it could be right next door.